Hello everyone, TLSG here, back again with another daily Marvel Snap video. So today the featured location did go away, and so now we're just back to regular play. And so thinking through what I wanted to run, the first deck list that I did test out and I tried was an all shield deck. So a deck list that utilized every single one of the shield cards that were listed on the Shield versus Hydra event, but it just didn't feel great. It did okay overall, but it just didn't feel good. And so then I've been really wanting to build another Lockjaw deck. I love the amount of upside that Lockjaw can bring. Yes, he can get some low rolls, but if you pay close attention to what cards you have in your deck, you can make a decision based on probability to have the highest chance of success in your rotation. So if you draw into all of your high cost cards, obviously you don't want to rotate unless you know very specifically what is in there and that you're going to get the upside. Because it always feels bad to rotate like a Sunspot into a Wasp or a Sunspot into a Jubilee into a Wasp is always the lowest of low rolls. But as long as we pay attention to what we have in our deck list, this performs pretty well, and it has the Thor Jane Foster package or combo package, which does some pretty cool things and can offer quite a bit of power. And so let's run through the deck list really quickly before we jump into a few games. First up, we have Wasp. If we flip into Jane Foster, that's going to pull the Wasp out of our deck. We're then going to be able to play the zero cost card to rotate it again for free to give us some pretty decent upside in those free rotations. And then we have Sunspot. He is either going to be a card that we drop on turn 1 and let buff up over time, or he's going to be primarily a rotation tool. It just depends on when we draw him into our hand. And then we have Okoye. Okoye is the perfect card to rotate into your deck. Okoye is going to buff all of the cards that are left in your deck, and then you're going to rotate out immediately and get the increased upside of whatever cards you draw into. And so it can be just that little bit of power advantage to swing that card or that lane in your favor potentially. And then we have Ironheart. Ironheart is going to be a decent one to drop into a Lockjaw lane to rotate out because she's going to be able to buff the other cards on the board before leaving and hopefully pulling into a Giganto, an Infinite, or something rather large. And then we have the goodest of boys. We have Lockjaw. Lockjaw is going to enable some really crazy combos here with our low and no cost cards. We can easily flip into things like Giganto, Doc Ock, Odin, Infinite, some really high impact, high power cards. Then we have Jubilee. Jubilee is able to either be used to try to pull into our Thor, or if we use her and she pulls into our Lockjaw, that is an immediate rotation because of the way that her on reveal and Lockjaw's on reveal works, and Lockjaw's ability works. He actually cycles Jubilee back into the deck immediately. It's always a fun mechanic whenever you do get the Lockjaw pull with your Jubilee. But ideally, we can use this as a way to try and get into one of our high cost cards, or even Thor would be a good card to pull if we don't have him in hand. And then we have Thor. Thor is going to, of course, shuffle a Mjolnir into your deck, which is then going to be able to buff him up further. Once you drop it on the board, if you have a space in your Lockjaw lane, that becomes a free cycle rotation tool. And then if not, then you can always drop it in a lane and then follow it up with an Odin to get the double trigger on Thor. Just a really good high power potential with this card in the Lockjaw list. And then we have Jane Foster. Some games we're going to curve naturally into the Lockjaw, Thor into a different location, Jane Foster into the Thor location, and then we can rotate 3 cards in the Lockjaw lane for that last turn to try to push a decent amount of power onto the board to swing it in our favor. And then next up we have one of my favorite cards, Doc Ock. Doc Ock is going to create some really crazy interactions. You never really know exactly what's going to happen with Doc Ock, but he can do some really cool things. He can either pull into, let's say the opponent's running a Hela. He can pull into those discard cards, potentially forcing them to discard their Hela. If they're running a Devil Dino and they have their Devil Dino on the board, you can use Doc Ock to pull into their resources, which is going to reduce the overall power level of that Devil Dino play. You can use this to force cards that run a combo, so like an Onslaught, Mystique, Patriot combo. You can use this to potentially pull Mystique out of play order so that she's no longer going to be able to be a threat or be effective. And then other times you're going to pull it directly into a Shang-Chi, you're going to pull into their Infinite, their high power cards. And so it can brick your deck. It can also win you a game single-handedly as well. And then we have Odin. Odin is going to allow us to re-trigger any of the on-reveal abilities that we have in that lane. So whether that be an Ironheart, an Okoye, a Jubilee, Thor, Mjolnir, we have a lot of good on-reveal abilities in this list that Odin will potentially be able to trigger or retrigger. And then we have Giganto. Giganto is going to be a great card to flip into, and sometimes all we have to do is play him naturally on turn 6 into the left lane, because 14 power is something that I almost never anticipate from my opponents, and it might just be enough to push a location in your favor to win the game. And then we have Infinite. Infinite, 90% of the time, we're going to want to either flip into this or cheat it out onto the board, but there are some games and some scenarios where we have Sunspot on the board. Maybe we skip turn 5 to play this onto the board naturally on 6, along with rotating our 0-cost cards on 6 as well. We can do some decently powerful things with Infinite, and by having Sunspot in the list as well, it helps us enable the freedom to skip on turn 5 if we need to, and if we think that power level is going to be enough to swing the game in our favor. But that is the rundown of the deck list. We are going to go ahead and jump into a few games. I hope you guys enjoy. All right, so first up we have Rye ABC. The first location is Stark Tower, so I actually don't think we play our Sunspot there. I think we're going to go ahead and play Sunspot into one of these far right lanes. That way we know that they're going to be pushing for a lot of power in Stark Tower. It's going to be hard to compete unless we can do something like flip. We do pull into our Infinite naturally, so this may be a game where we skip on turn 5 into a turn 6 Infinite. It just depends on how the rest of the game unfolds and how it plays out. Because a Infinite into Monster Metropolis should almost guarantee that we get that location. Oh my gosh, unfortunate. We are getting such low rolls today. So we played the Sunspot, which, I mean, we know that that is a potential outcome. And it turns into the Superflow. So we're not going to get the extra energy each turn, unfortunately. I am going to go ahead and pass on turn 3. If we draw into our Lockjaw next turn, maybe we play that. If not, then I think we go with a Jubilee play. So we do a Thor, which is actually going to be much more beneficial for us. I think it does look like we're going to skip on turn 5. We're going to play an Infinite naturally into Monster Metropolis. That is going to allow us to, if we draw into a Mjolnir in the next couple of turns, we'll be able to drop Mjolnir on turn 6 along with our Infinite. For some decent upside. Ooh, and a Wasp, I guess. We have a 1 out of 5 chance of pulling into a Mjolnir. We may need it to win. Who knows? So they have a Giganto over in the left lane. It looks like they are running a Hella deck. They discarded a card with Calling Wing and Lady Sif, so they may have a Hella resummon here. Let's go with the Infinite into Monster Metropolis. Let's go with the Wasp into the Superflow. Just to give us that one additional power that may be the make or break play. So they do have the Hella, so it resummons the Death into the middle. Hellcow discards a couple of cards, but that is fine. Our Infinite is going to be the highest power card in that location, so it takes the +3 power buff away from the Death, which swings that location in our favor. The Superflow we were able to hold down as well. Had they resummoned into something like an Infinite, that would have been much harder to compete against. I had their Hellcow bounced here as well. Going against the Hella is always a casino. We did win against the casino this time. Let's go ahead and jump into the next one. All right, so next up we have Scion. And maybe they're a bot. We're gonna hit them with the Hello, and we'll keep an eye out. So they did respond, so they should be a legitimate human player. So I think on turn 3 we're going to drop our Lockjaw. We're going to hold our Sunspot. I think that way we can use it as a rotation tool, since we do have Lockjaw in our starting hand. And so let's go ahead and skip on turn 2 as well. Turn 3 we'll drop our Lockjaw. I think we probably play it into the Avengers compound. That's going to set us up for a turn 5 play. We know that we're going to want to drop Thor on 4, and then on turn 5, ideally, unless we draw into Jane Foster, we're going to want to rotate and flip. And so Lockjaw in the Avengers compound just feels like it fits, and it's going to be that right play or that right fit for us. And so we do draw into Infinite, unfortunately, so we're not going to be able to flip into that card. Let's go ahead and do one flip here, see if we can get any kind of lucky upside. Maybe we flip into an immediate Mjolnir. We can flip out of Doc Ock. So the play here with Wave means that we're only going to be able to play one card next turn, no matter... Ooh, then we do get the immediate Mjolnir flip, which is interesting. So for turn 5, we know that we are going to cycle our cards. We could either do a Doc Ock to force them to pull all of their cards and all of their resources here, but that leaves us in a really hard spot to win Clintar. We could always potentially follow up, but we are going to rotate our Doc Ock out after we play him. And so that makes me want to do the Jubilee instead. In our deck, we still have an Odin, we have a Jane Foster, and then we have some lower rolls like the now Wasp, the Okoye, and the Ironheart. So let's see. So Wasp, Okoye, Ironheart, that's 3 potential targets that are bad versus the Odin and the Jane Foster that are good. It doesn't feel great. because we're not able to drop the Giganto or the Doc Ock over here, but we do have to play into the left lane. We're just going to go with the Jubilee. We do get 2 flips. And so after the first turn, and then we get the Odin. So that is going to buff up our Thor even further. And then it will leave the 8 power in that lane. If Jubilee can now pull into, Wasp, we can't get the perfect high roll. If it could have pulled into Jane Foster, that would have been fantastic. But they played a Hobgoblin, trying to kind of stifle that lane. And because we did end up capping it out, they're not going to be able to compete with us. The next choice or next play line would have potentially been like a Doc Ock here to finish out this location, or maybe even something like a Sunspot and a Pass. That way we didn't draw into any of their additional cards. But overall, not a bad rotation. The first couple of games we got pretty bad RNG, but it does seem to be picking back up. And so now let's start snapping a little bit more aggressively so we can collect those cubes for shield. All right, so next up we have Neutral Milk. And the first location, even though the featured location is gone, we do flip into the raft. And so I'm going to start investing some cards or resources there to see if maybe we can end up capping it out before they can. But if we don't end up capping it out, that's okay. We're not going to force it if it doesn't feel right for our deck or for the cards that we have in hand. So the Olympia location is actually pretty nice. We're going to be able to do a Lockjaw. We draw into 2 cards, so we have 4 left in our deck. One is Jane Foster, or maybe I haven't seen Jane Foster this entire video. But we also have Wasp in our list. We have a Koye as well. So not terrible cards to pull. I think maybe we do a Thor here, and then on 4, and then on 5, maybe we do something like a Jubilee here. Ooh, so they use an Electro, so they're only going to be able to play 1 card per turn now, unless they send that to us with a Viper, which that always feels really low impact. And so maybe we go ahead and go with a Wasp cycle. I was going to drop a Jubilee there, but I don't think we have to with the 0 cost cards. We're able to do the free rotation enablers, and so we can get some decent upside. Ooh. So they do drop a Professor X. They win the Nidavellir location. We just have to be able to win the other 2. And so with them having the extra energy this next upcoming turn, they're going to be able to drop a 6 cost card, and then they're going to be able to do the same thing on 6 as well. Okay, so dropping Doc Ock does not feel right. It doesn't feel great. I think we do an Iron Heart here. If we do an Iron Heart here, we're going to be able to drop Odin and the free 6 cost card that we get into Olympia on this final turn to get the increased upside from Iron Heart triggering again, and then we can kind of see where that puts us or what it looks like. And so I think this is the play that we're going to lock into. Let's see what 6 cost card they drop. They may end up doing something like a Destroyer, or they could be doing a leader play to copy the cards that we push over into Olympia. And so, and we draw into Okoye, which is an incredibly low roll. Very unfortunate. So they do drop the Destroyer, so they can now drop more than 1 card per turn. So with a Destroyer, actually, no, they could do something like 12 power or maybe a Giganto. So if we pass here, that brings us up to 29. If they do a 12 power card like Magneto, that wouldn't, at that point, they'd only bring them up to 28. And so we're going to have to not play any power this turn. So that means we're going to do our Mjolnir to buff up our Thor. We're going to do our leader, and then we're just going to leave it at that. That will cap out this location. If they do something decent, as long as they don't have a Giganto, which they might. They might have a Giganto, or they could have a Taskmaster, which would be 32. I think they have a Taskmaster. That would be the play. From the Electro ramp, they drop 1 card. It is a Taskmaster, right? Taskmaster would be the one that wins at this 16 power. Anything over, I think, 12 power would win for us. It's the Giganto. Oh my gosh, we get the 1 power off loss. Had the Okoye been an Infinite, we would have absolutely won there. The only card left in our deck was an Infinite. We had the chance to flip into it. It just didn't play out. We played the cards that we could where we could to try to push that advantage, but it just didn't work out this time. All right, so next up we have Peebles. And in our starting hand, we have our Sunspot, we have a Koye. Maybe we go with not doing the rotation, the Lockjaw rotation this game. Maybe we just go with playing the cards naturally to trigger the raft. So let's do our Okoye. Maybe we can draw into either our Wasp or Ironheart, maybe. Would both be okay to draw into here. And so there will be a 7th turn. So having this additional 6 cost card feels pretty, will feel pretty decent. Let's go ahead and skip this turn. It feels bad that we're going to skip this turn, but okay. So we're going to go ahead and play Thor over into Limbo. We're abandoning Raft. We're abandoning the Raft. We're not drawing into cards that we can play over there. We're hitting our high roll. So we have to pivot at that point. We don't have anything that we can really be competitive with. And so let's go ahead and go in a different direction with it. So they only have 11 power in this lane. So that's actually pretty good for us. We don't have to worry too much. Like we could do, actually, we can do, I would snap, but I think they would run. We can do a Jane Foster here. That will pull into our Mjolnir. We can always do a Mjolnir and an Odin to really buff up this lane. So now they use Mr. Negative, but I think it's a little bit too little too late, right? I say we force them to play all their cards here. And then we do the Mjolnir and Odin. That's going to be a 20 power push along with the 11. So unless we just hit an insane low roll with the Doc Ock pull, we should be just fine. We should be a-okay. Let's go ahead and pull in and let's see what happens. Let's see what Doc Ock comes up with. Iron Man's not great. That is not a good one. That's not the one you want to see. Wolfsbane in that spot is definitely not the one you want to see either. And then Sarah. Okay. Okay. Because I am 100% down for hitting them with a 12 power play, 20 power play. That's going to be 37. It's actually overkill over here. Do we snap? Do we not snap? I'm just going to... Ooh, really now? Snap. Did we get jebaited? How can they win? So let's say they have a Captain Marvel that buffs this up by 4. That would put them at 16, puts them at 15. But we're going to get 1 trigger with our Sunspot to 16. This is going to be a double trigger, which brings us up to a really high power lane. But I am incredibly nervous. Let's not even do the Wasp. There's no point in competing for Dark Dimension. If they had like a Juggernaut, it would force this one off, and I don't want to even like make that potential a reality. They dropped an awful lot of cards. I don't think they have a blue Marvel. Most don't run that, but we need to wait and let this see what this turns out. So the 37 power Limbo lane is good for us. The 16 power left Limbo lane, I guess. Ooh my gosh, we almost lost. Wow. So I forgot about the Raft and the 6 cost card that they end up getting. It just so happens that they got Spectrum, which was their free cost, their 0 cost 6 power card, which buffed up their Mojo, but it also buffed up their Sarah and their Iron Man to duplicate that power. Oh my gosh. That probably looks like calculated, but it was not in any way, shape, or form. I didn't even anticipate the Spectrum here. All right, so next up we have Corson, and if you guys are playing right now and you're having a hard time climbing, don't feel bad. This ladder is so much more competitive than it has been in the past, and I think it's largely due to the fact that the event has drawn a lot more people and a lot more competitive play back in, and so don't feel bad by any means. It is definitely a much more competitive environment than it was before. Ooh, and so we snap and then they snap back. We do get the Sinister London, so we're going to be able to do a double Thor, which is going to be great. We could potentially do a double Infinite at the end. We even worry about the double Okoye. Yeah, it could be the make or break. Just in case we don't get into any of our other high rolls, I think that's what we're going to go with, is the Okoye. They drop a Bucky Barnes, so they are going to run some kind of destruction deck. If they run like a Venom, that feels really, really, really bad. But okay, so we have 8 energy here. We could do our Giganto, which is a massive, massive Giganto. But I think we start enabling our Thor a little bit earlier. We can do Thor, which will duplicate. We could do a Jubilee, which pulls into one of our cards. Is that worth it though? I almost don't want to drop the Jubilee, because Jubilee could end up pulling into, or like whiffing and pulling into, I guess anything it pulled into would be okay. If it pulls into Odin, that feels a little bit bad. Doc Ock feels okay. So yeah, let's go ahead and go with the one Jubilee. Let's go with the Thor first. That way we get the double Mjolnirs. Jubilee has a chance to pull into a Mjolnir. our win conditions are going to be the 2 Thors that we have on the board. So it pulls into a Sunspot, which is not terrible. Definitely not terrible by any means. The Carnage is pretty nice. It's going to retain its buff when it pushes over into another lane. Ooh, and then they get an Arnim Zola. Where'd they get the... Oh, they just had an Arnim Zola. And they do some pretty wicked things. It could have ended up eating their whole lane with the Carnage, which was kind of a bold play. I mean, we will respect the boldness. We'll respect the boldness for sure. So we're going to go ahead and skip on this turn. I would have thought their Arnim Zola was like a late game play though. They did get to push quite a bit of power, but that almost feels like that's just about all that they're able to do now. And so they do take care of a Sunspot. Unfortunately, they destroy it. So let's go ahead and do our Jane Foster into the vault. Next turn, we're going to be able to do some pretty nice things. We're going to be able to do a double Ironheart. We're going to be able to do an Ironheart and then quadruple Mjolnirs. We're not able to snap, are we? But okay, so the death is fine. Death is absolutely fine. That means that they can't use like a Shang-Chi or anything to destroy our Thors. And then we're going to have 4 triggers. So that is going to be plus 24 power to each of our Thors. Each one. Absolutely nuts. Let's go with the Doc Ock. So it's going to be potentially here and here. And then we go with let's go with the quadruple Mjolnirs. And maybe we go Doc Ock here. Just for fun. I don't think we win that one, but the Mjolnirs is what we're relying on. So the massive Thor power is huge. Taskmaster is going to come in and copy the death, but it's not going to be quite enough. These Mjolnirs are about to just go absolutely nuts and buffing up each of our Thors each time they're played. So 24 power to each of the Thors, making them, 28 power total for each individual one. Absolutely massive. Huge Thors. All right, and there we go. And it's one of those numbers that it's so big that it's difficult to read the font, but it is 28 power. Corson knew that they had lost, but they did us a favor and they stuck it out anyways. I think that's 28, but it honestly looks like 30 something. No, it's 30 total, right? Because 6 triggers, so 24 bonus plus the base 6. So it is 30 power each. Absolutely huge. Corson did us a favor in sticking around and allowed us to do that high roll play. And so very much appreciated, Corson. Let's go ahead and jump into one more. All right, so next up we have Ping. And in our starting hand, we have Lockjaw and we have Jubilee. So we're going to be able to have a pretty decent flip right out of the gate on turn 4 if we don't draw into Thor. Thor obviously takes priority before we start flipping cards, but otherwise it's going to be a great kind of utility or usage. So let's go ahead and skip here as well. If they drop an Iceman, that feels really bad on us. Okay, so they do Mojo into the big house. We don't plan on capping this location out, so it should be fine. Okay, so Ironheart. Let's do Lockjaw here. Next turn, we'll do a Jubilee pull into the flip. Hopefully we end up getting something pretty good. We can always eventually do an Odin into New York, which would send these cards back. Or send the Green Goblin back, rather, and that's if we need to do that. Maybe we don't. Maybe we can pull all their cards in with a Doc Ock and just be done with it. But so they drop an Angela, so that's okay. We do Jubilee, which will pull into a rock, and then we're gonna flip. So the one rock in our deck, we do now have out of our deck list, so that's at least out of the way. Sometimes Lockjaw is gonna be your friend. Other times he pulls into a rock and a wasp. Let's go ahead and drop the Doc Ock into New York. Otherwise, we'd be able to move these cards out and cycle more. Actually, we can still do that, so maybe we can get some halfway decent upside. I do want to see what kind of stuff we pull out. Maybe we get lucky and oh no, not again. Oh right, so our Doc Ock pulled into a leader and a magic. They naturally played Rock Slide onto the board, and then we had to follow that up with a Jane Foster. So not the best play, but it does give us something that's pretty close anyways. And so now what we would end up doing, they only had 1 card, now would be 2 cards in hand. What we were going to do was drop an Ironheart to cycle in. It would have pulled out something from our list, but mainly the Ironheart would have been there to buff up some of our cards. Then we could have dropped something as little as an Okoye to swing and finish off this location with the 2 cards they had in hand. it's very unlikely that they'd overcome our power in the Nidavellir location. And so as you could tell, I am battling some connection issues on BlueStacks. So I am going to go ahead and end the video here. That is 6 games that I plan on featuring. So it's kind of in line with our other videos. But I do want to get this connection issue fixed before I do really anything else. So I hope that you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to leave it a like and a comment down below. I hope that you guys enjoyed the video. As always, this has been TLSG. Later, guys.